Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Siskind. I am the author of the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series of books, as well as playing solo jazz piano, second edition. Um, if you like this video, then this book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano, might be for you. So this video is about Brad Mehldau. I think kind of all pianists love Brad Mehldau, but maybe particularly pianists of my generation. I'm like in my mid-30s, and when I was in late high school, early college, like Brad Mehldau was first putting out those Art of the Trio albums, and it was a sound that I had never heard before, certainly out of a jazz pianist, and I'm still just so inspired by him. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I see in his compositions. And my number one pet peeve about YouTube is whenever somebody takes a really, really complex thing and says, it's easy. It is not easy to compose like Brad Mehldau, not at all. And this video is not going to make you instantly a Brad Mehldau composer, but it can get you closer. And at the end, I'm going to show you a tune that I wrote based on kind of the principles that I'm telling you. And I think actually does pretty well. Sounds kind of like a Brad tune. You know, is it as good as his tunes? Like, no, but like it's in the genre. All right, so that's a disclaimer. You know, this is a few small pointers about a very complex subject and a truly great artist. So what are we going to talk about? First thing is I would say that in many of Brad Mehldau's tunes, the melodies are simple and singable and oftentimes kind of diatonic. Like they really comply to Western harmony and harmonic principles. Let's just say, you know, often diatonic or close to diatonic within a section or phrase. And then what he's often doing is he's kind of reharmonizing these simple melodies. So I could imagine, and when I imitate him, this is what I do. I could imagine he writes the melodies first without thinking of the harmonies, and then later comes back and is like, ooh, how could I create a different color for that? Okay, so let's kind of say that he reharmonizes the melodies with different sounds. Now, how does he reharmonize these melodies? A lot of times, he reharmonizes the melody with stepwise bass lines. Of course, nothing's 100% of the time, but man, you'll look and a lot of his bass lines are moving by step. One of the elements that allows him to create these stepwise bass lines is that he uses a lot of inversions. Okay, so it's not that he's moving from C major to B major to B flat major to A major. It's that he's moving from C to G over B to E flat over B flat to A half diminished to D flat over A flat. Okay, just as an example. While we're talking about his harmonic palette, it needs to be mentioned that there's many chords without sevenths. Okay, so if you're coming from traditional jazz theory, this is probably surprising to you, right? We talk about chords as having sevenths in jazz, right? It's just kind of standard to write C major, 7, C minor, 7. But one of the things that makes Brad's, can I call him Brad's? Okay, I couldn't call him Brad's. One of the things that makes Mr. Mehldau's harmony interesting is that it almost has more of a genesis in classical music and in rock music. If you listen to him being interviewed, he talks about his love for the high romantics of classical music, in particular Brahms. He loves Brahms. If you ever heard the song John Boy, that's written for Johannes Brahms, which is kind of funny. And many of you know probably that he's done a lot of covers of bands like Radiohead, the Beatles, people like Paul Simon, and a lot of his musical knowledge and background comes from that world. And in fact, he did a solo piano album of Beatles tunes recently, right? So a lot of these chords are triads, or maybe a triad with a ninth, or maybe something kind of in that world, and don't have sevenths. Okay, so that's going to be really important to getting the sound right. Okay, and then here's where we're going to get into just a little bit of complexity, which is that there's a lot of mixture of major and minor. Okay, there's fancy words for this. Modal mixture is one. Modal borrowing is the other. I always forget that. So couple ways to think about this, and I've talked about this on the channel a bit recently. So one is like melodically. So let's just pretend that I'm going to write a melody without the chords, okay? One thing that I could do is I could include some notes from the key of C major and some notes from the parallel minor, C minor, okay? So instead of maybe an A, which would be in the key of C major, I might use an A flat, which would be in the key of C minor. Instead of using an E, which would be in C major, I might use an E flat from C minor, right? Or vice versa. If I'm in a minor key, I can start using some of the notes from a major key. So if, let's see if this works. You know, if I'm trying to make a simple melody in a major key, so there's a nice simple melody, and you'll see that Mehldau's melodies are not that complex, truly. Right, so that's all in C major. I could start mixing in. Right, I started in major, and then I had this A flat. And one of the things that Mehldau does, and oh God, people are gonna just crucify me for forgetting this word. Somebody out there knows the word for the flat too. There's a really fancy classical word for this, and Mehldau does enjoy using that. So like, it's the Neapolitan. I honestly Googled that while we were just right here. So you'll see him sometimes using that. You'll also see him using this mixture of major and minor within the harmonies. Okay. So let's come back to my little example harmonies. Close enough. So let's go back. So the easiest way to harmonize that would be with chords in C major. Go 1 5 1 5. But what if I decided to do it a different way? Teaching you to do spontaneous examples. So you see I'm using that A flat, so I'm borrowing this chord from the key of C minor. It doesn't really work that well. But I'm going to show you some instances where he's borrowing harmonies as well. Oh, this is going to be a really long video, but I hope you'll forgive me. I think it'll be interesting. So we're going to look at a couple different Mehldau tunes here. Let's go. All right, Resignation. I love this tune. It's in 7. Kind of cool. I love this. It's really an AABA tune. It's like very traditional in terms of form. But let's look at some of these elements I talked about. So first of all, let's start with the melody. If I take these chords out and I kind of look at the kind of lowest common denominator chords. So listen for just the melody. You don't have to be a genius to write that, right? It's a beautiful melody, but it's pretty simple. And you could certainly imagine someone harmonizing it. Like 1 5 5 1, G minor, D7, D7, G minor. Or even but look at what Mehldau does. First of all, he starts with his chord without a 7. And then he uses stepwise bass line. Here it's a stepwise ascending bass line to get from C to F. And here it's all half steps, right? inversions in a row at the end. And another inversion, it's kind of interesting, he just changes from B flat over F to B flat over D. So same chord, two different bass notes, right? More inversions coming here. This is that Neapolitan that I talked about that I couldn't remember the name of. And then here's a great example of modal borrowing. I'm going to highlight it in purple. In terms of harmony, right? We're in G minor, but all of a sudden we're using a G major chord and an E minor chord. And notice that these chords, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, are all connected by step, right? In the bass. Cool. So, this is like such a great example of all of those things that I'm talking about, right? We've got our tonic chord doesn't have a seventh. And then we're moving by step by step by step. Then we use the Neapolitan. Then we use modal mixture. So it all fits together beautifully. I want to show you a less obvious example of modal borrowing, and I need you guys to work with me a little bit here. So the bridge starts at C. The bridge is so beautiful. I just love it. I love that he starts on the second inversion major seventh chord. It's a very Mehldau sound. It's so underused. It's a major seventh chord with the seventh in the bass. So beautiful. Now, I told you I was going to show you modal borrowing, but first, it's key, I think, with all of these tunes, to play them without the chords first and see what you hear. So. Okay, so one way to interpret this, and there's certainly multiple ways, is that we're basically in the key center of A major here, right? None of these notes are outside of A major. We could also think of it as E major. If I had to harmonize this, like classically that sounds better, or A major, maybe it's even C minor. Hard to say, like, it's something in there. I think that C sharp minor, did I say sharp before? I meant C sharp minor if I didn't say that. The C sharp minor is like the most convincing harmonization. But let's just humor me. Since we do start this section on an A major, let's think about this A major. We could say that this then goes to A minor, right? Right? And same thing if we were thinking about E major. That C would come from E minor. So either way, I feel like there's this modal mixture happening here. Now, let's think about A minor here. And then this goes up by minor thirds. So the next thing in the pattern should be E flat minor, but what is it? It's not E flat minor, it's E flat major, because we have this G natural. See what happened there? So we suddenly go to E flat major instead of minor. So here, I would also kind of consider this some modal borrowing or a flip between major and minor at the very least. So listen to my harmonized version one more time that makes everything really clear, and then we'll listen to his version again. So I'm gonna I'll start at the beginning of the bridge. simplified harmonization. Right? And then what's actually really funny to me is that it goes right back. A flat minor would belong to E flat major, right? Or sorry, let me try it again. If we're thinking about the key of E flat major now, A flat minor is the minor 4. That'd be like from the minor key. So there's just this constant mixing of major and minor sounds. Okay, let's hear his harmonization now. How did he come up with the chords? Once again, it's pretty stepwise, right? Let's see, what color can I use? Green. A in the bass, to G in the bass, to F in the bass, to F sharp in the bass, to G in the bass, to A flat in the bass, right? Like, I'm not making this up, folks. It's largely stepwise. It's also just kind of interesting to note that a lot of times when he does leap, like he does right at the end of that phrase, it's by a fifth. A flat leaping to C sharp. We see this some other places, like G leaping to C. There was one other that I saw before. That'll have to do for now. Oh yeah, B leaping to E. There. All right, so pretty interesting. I have 2 more tunes to show you, but I'll do that on another video. Let me conclude by showing you the song that I wrote, inspired by Brad Mehldau, using these principles. So, sorry for my handwriting. Let me play you the melody alone first. Okay, so notice what happened there. I'm in C minor, I'm using A flats, and then in bar 7, all of a sudden I'm using A naturals. But imagine how you could harmonize this really simply. And so here I go to a different key center. Okay, so nothing complicated. Now, like Mehldau, I'm using a lot of stepwise bass motion here. So let's see how this turned out. You can be the judge. Did I capture the Mehldau essence or not? Okay, here's my bridge. I totally copied him. I'm starting on a second inversion chord here. I'm using the Neapolitan, that's why you're seeing A flat and D flat. I reharmonized my last A a little bit to make it more exciting. enjoyed this video, you could tell I have a lot of fun analyzing these tunes and making it. If you enjoyed this and you want to see me analyze a couple more Brad Mehldau tunes looking at these sorts of details, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll feel inspired and get to it. Also, if you enjoyed this, like I said earlier, playing solo jazz piano has this like kind and level of content. And definitely Brad comes up a lot in that book. So check it out, jeremysiskind.com. If you made it this far, why don't you comment with John Boy, the name of the Mehldau tune I was talking about earlier. Have a great one, everyone.